Staple them to the fridge, put them on your fridge magnets, wherever.
Screensaver. This is my screensaver.
Loz's top 8. 1 to 8. A reason for each. Loz, number 1. Who's finishing top in season 2020 and why?
Canberra Raiders.
Loz, you can't be biased because they're your team.
Never biased. I've never picked the Raiders to finish on top of the comp in the last 26 years. Halfway through last year, I thought that they were a chance to win the competition, and that was the first time I've ever felt like that since I've retired. And I genuinely believe that they are the team that can win this year's comp. I think they'll be much improved this season. I think the fact that they got to the grand final last year and lost will be motivation for them. I like the way that this squad has been building. They've got the Englishmen who are setting an example down there with the Canberra side. If Josh Hodgson stays fit, I believe he could be the difference this season. And I think that they are, no doubt, the team that I think will challenge the Roosters and will win the competition this year.
What about the loss of Leilua and Rapana on that side of attack?
I think with Curtis Scott, Bailey Simonson is a former All Black Sevens player or New Zealand Sevens player. He's a big, strong lad. He came back. He learnt the game again last year. He'll be a lot better. Curtis Scott was on the verge of playing State of Origin 18 months ago. So I think they've replaced those two guys. Yes, it's going to take a little bit of time because they won't have that connection straight away. But I see them improving, and I see them as a team that's more mature, and they'll know how to get the job done. So for me, they're number 1.
Number 2.
The Sydney Roosters. I think it's difficult to win 3 in a row, and without Cronk and without Latrell Mitchell. I think people may well underestimate the impact that he had with the Roosters last year, because there was a number of games where Latrell either kicked the field goal, kicked the goal, scored the try, or set up a winning try for them. And I know they've got other superstars, and I think they'll be hard to beat, but I just think the loss of Cronk and the loss of Mitchell allows other teams the sense that they're vulnerable and they're not as strong as what they've been the previous years.
Number 3.
South Sydney. I think South have done that standing job getting Latrell Mitchell to the team. You look at their back line, it's scintillating. Some of the best Indigenous talent the game has seen. Question mark over their forwards, but if they can keep Cam Murray on the field, Tom Burgess on the field, Damien Cook on the field, I think they're in for a massive year.
Teams will try and attack them in the middle, won't they, with no Sam Burgess, no John Sutton?
Yeah, they will. And again, I think all teams, when they get on a bit of a roll, when teams get on the back foot, that's the place to go, is to just drive numbers through the middle and really put the big men under pressure. That'll be no different with South City. Number 4, the Eels. I think they're a chance of winning the competition as well. And for me, recruiting Campbell Gillard, by all reports, he's training well, wants to redeem himself from the disappointments of last year when he was playing with Penrith. Ryan Madison gives them a ball-playing option on an edge. Mitchell Moses, we've been waiting for him to be consistent with his football over a long period. He did that last year, and I'm expecting a lot more from him this season. His combination with Dylan Brown will get better. Gutherson at the back. They've got strike. They've got big wingers. So I think they're in for a terrific year. 5, Manly. Trebojevic brothers. They'll win a comp in the next couple of years, Manly. They've got sensational forwards. Fanua Blake to power up front. You've got Jakey Trebojevic as a 13. You've got Thompson and Sirinen on an edge. So they've got strike all over the paddock. Number 6, the Melbourne Storm. I just couldn't leave the Storm out. I just know that they're consistent with their football. I don't know whether they'll have the class, but I think they'll be there or thereabouts. Cowboys, for me, are the Smokies, because I'm unsure of how they will start the year. This is over the first 6 weeks. I think game 1 they'll be up because they're playing their first game at a new stadium and they're playing against their arch rivals, the Brisbane Broncos. But I don't think we'll see their best football at the start of the year. I think we'll start to see that halfway through the year. And I'm really excited about the combination with Michael Morgan and Val Holmes. They're good mates. I think they're brother-in-laws. And I reckon that Morgan is set for his best year in a couple.
So that's 7. So you got Canberra, Roosters, Souths, Parramatta, your top 4. Manly 5, Storm 6, Cowboys 7. 1 spot left. The Clarkies Tigers make the cut.
Oh, it's hard, isn't it, when you're looking at that 7th, 8th position. I've gone for Newcastle. I just gone with Adam O'Brien, the influence that he will have up there. And, of course, the players last year, they thought they needed change. And they wanted change. They got change with Adam O'Brien. He's improved the team. You think Ponga will be a lot better. So we'll see how they go. But it was difficult to leave out Penrith. It was difficult to leave out the Tigers. And it was difficult to leave out the Brisbane Broncos.
Well, they're the most high-profile club missing from your top 8 is the Broncos, no doubt about that, especially when you look at the market. They're on the 7th line of betting in the market. So Brisbane, that can only indicate pressure on Anthony Seibold.
Well, it's funny. I think that they've got some of the best young talent. I still don't know whether they'll be consistent with their performance. I think Payne Haas is set for a massive year. In fact, if I was to choose a Daley M player, he'd be that
already.
I think Payne Haas, I think he finished 4th last year, only 6 or 7 points behind Tedesco in his first season of NRL. I think he'd be a lot better for it. And in the trials, he's been their best player. And I think he's set for a massive year, Payne Haas. So I think he's $23 to win the Daley M. He'd be someone that I'd be looking at winning that award.
Clark, are you bristling?
No, pretty good. Of course, I'm disappointed. I'd like to see the Tigers in that 8th position. I think I've probably got 2 differences out of that 8. I'd probably have Tigers at 8th and Brisbane in the top 8. I think I completely understand that it's hard to fit, 12 teams into 8.
For me, the top 6 was a standout.
Yep, I agree.
For me, the top 6 were a standout. 7, 8, I could have put Brisbane, Penrith, Tigers, Sharks, Warriors. I could have put them all in, but you can't.
You saw with Parramatta last year how much that new stadium, how many competition points that meant for them. That's what it's going to do for the Cowboys as well, you'd suspect.
That's what I factored in. I factored in the fact that new stadium, they should be winning a lot more of their games. The conditions up there suit them more than any other team because it's warm when you go up there and play. And Valentine Holmes and Michael Morgan. I think we haven't seen the best of Morgan. A couple of years ago, he was the best player in the game. He suffered a couple of head knocks. He's had time now to recover. He's been away from the game, and I think the combination with he and Valentine Holmes will be super. Their forward pack is as good as anyone in the competition. So, and Paul Green's been under a little bit of pressure. They've changed the way they want to play. They look as though they've found that energy and excitement with their football. We'll get a good indication of how they're going to go when they take on the Broncos on Friday night.
I think the other 2 things as well that's so hard to consider right now, but injuries, I think all teams, when you look at their squad on paper, I think there's a real defining top 13. And then if you lose some players, I think the rules of engagement change. And the other thing, I think Origin, because of how tough that competition is, and again, I'm a watcher, but there's every chance you're going to lose some of your big players due to Origin injuries.
Yeah, it's a question that clubs, think about all the time when they go into the recruiting process, because you need big name players and you need good players to win big matches, of course. And the Raiders have sort of had success recruiting Kiwis and recruiting the Englishmen who aren't a part of State of Origin. Yeah. And if you keep them out of that State of Origin period, you've got players that are fresher at the back end of the year. And I think that might be a path that some of the clubs now start to go down. Look at recruiting people from England because they're not having to play those extra games if they're sensational players. But if you can get through that period and rest your players, which Trent Robinson has been able to do with the Roosters. So they've been sitting pretty. He's had the luxury of being able to rest and make sure his players are recovered and then give them limited amount of game time to have them ready to go at the back end of the year. And the Roosters have set themselves up in a position where they don't have to play everyone week in, week out after the Origin series. They've won enough games to keep them in the mix. So he's handled it really well. Mm-hmm. Some other clubs haven't been afforded that opportunity because they've been chasing their tail. They haven't won enough games early in the year.
Loz, how important is it for staff and the players to know what it feels like to lose, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 players for Origin out of your team? Like I would imagine, again, you talk about your role at the start of the season. I think back to playing cricket for New South Wales when there was Steve Waugh, Mark Waugh, Michael Slater, Mark Taylor, Glenn McGrath, all these great players, Michael Bevan. Your role was very different when they were there. Then when they left for Australian duties, your role changes. You become more of a senior player or more important to the team. How do you cope with that if you don't really know? You talk about some of these young superstars involved in the NRL. If you're playing for the Roosters, for example, you lose so many players to Origin, you become so much more important to your team through that period.
And you do, and that's why the Roosters and Trent Robinson have done a fantastic job, because regardless of who comes in, there's an expectation that you are going to do X, Y and Z when you pull on that shirt for the Roosters. There's things that are non-negotiable in a game, and most coaches these days will talk about the effort areas, and the effort areas have nothing to do with your skill. So it might be something like a kick pressure. You don't have to be the most skillful person in the game to be able to pull off a kick pressure. But when you're in that position, it's your time to go. You've got to get out of the line and you've got to put pressure on the kicker. On a kick chase, when the ball is kicked down the field and your bum's hanging on the ground and you're out of oxygen, you can't just say, well, I'm not going to be a part of this chase. You've actually got to get down there, present yourself in a line, so when the fullback returns it, he sees you there. He doesn't see a hole in the defensive system. And that's what the Roosters have been very big on and been able to do so well, is that regardless of who you are, there's things that we expect when you come into this football team. Yes, there's some skill level we can put on top of that, but that's non-negotiable. The other thing with the Roosters this year, when you're sitting around, they haven't got Latrell and they haven't got Cooper Cronk. So under pressure, you're thinking about, oh, geez, will young Flanagan handle this pressure? Who's going to pull us out of a sticky situation, which Latrell did a few times last year? Who's going to be that guy? Will Tedesco feel as though he's got to do a lot more, and that places a bit more pressure on him? And there's some unknowns there with the Roosters, but what they've been able to achieve is a good culture of people that come in, they know what they need to do, and they understand their role that they have to play.
Just recapping Loz's power rankings, he's got Canberra on top from the Roosters, Souths and Parramatta the top 4, Manly in 5, Melbourne in 6, the Cowboys 7 and Newcastle at 8. We'll recap it too after the 8 o'clock news this morning.